if God forbid this war does continue, it'll be a much bigger wave of people. And I think that will be the challenge. Certainly those 5 countries on the Ukrainian border will face. And I think we in Western Europe have to do more to take the pressure off those countries if this second wave does happen in the next 4 weeks, which I unfortunately, my gut tells me it will do.
So obviously you're in the ground in Poland. So what are you seeing? What are people saying? I mean, I saw on your Twitter, and I've seen elsewhere that you're helping refugees. So what is it that they're saying to you as you're speaking to them?
I mean, probably like a lot of people, watching the disaster unfolding before our eyes, and having done this before because I was involved in the Syria crisis and helping out with refugees there about 8 years ago now. And, I just sort of literally got a plane in 48 hours and came out here to see what I could do. And I saw also on social media, this is the great thing about social media, you could see, which of your friends are out there doing things. And I spotted a Latvian friend of mine who is out here, who has a bus company, and he was transporting really refugees from the Polish-Ukrainian border to Riga, to Berlin, to Paris, so the 3 main places, and I think Luxembourg as well. And so I joined him. I guess it was day 4 of the war, and I've been out here, and I have to say, number one, I think the Poles are doing an amazing job. I mean, they've been very, I can't sort of comment on the other countries like Slovakia, Moldova, Romania, and Hungary, but certainly here in Poland, where I am on the border, every smallish town that I go to near the border, is hosting people. I mean, whether it's in community centers, sports halls, they've got the beds down, they're providing food, they're providing support, and they're trying to help people. Now, there's a big sort of split between 2 different types of people. There are those that are clearly hoping the war is going to be over soon and don't want to leave Poland. Yeah. And then there's a second group of people that want to see friends or relatives, further away from Poland. So really in Western Europe. And I'd say the bulk of the people who we've been helping have been going to Germany. And the Germans seem to be very organized, not setting the sort of level of conditionality that we are in the UK. Now that's the first wave. The first wave of people are much more organized. They tend to have passports, they tend to have the right papers and so on. What's happening now, I suspect, is that will be a second wave as the bombing moves across the country from east to west, which will push other people who want to flee. They will tend to be from less middle class families, poorer families, who probably won't have the sort of level of paperwork and contacts that the first group have. And I think, if God forbid this war does continue, it'll be a much bigger wave of people. And I think that will be the challenge. Certainly those 5 countries on the Ukrainian border will face. And I think we in Western Europe have to do more to take the pressure off those countries if this second wave does happen in the next 4 weeks, which I unfortunately, my gut tells me it will do.
So what would you like to see the UK government doing? So they expanded last week the family visas.
I think initially the response was, if you've got family in the country, you can come in and and get processed and everything. But I think the challenge we really have, if we're saying we're going to take up to 200,000 people, there aren't 200,000 people who are going to have family connections in the UK. We have to streamline it more, which means, I think, accepting people more easily through the system. So until a few days ago, and I'm sorry, there's a lorry about to go in front of me making a noise.
No worries.
Okay, until a few days ago, I can't comment because I'm here on the border. But until a few days ago, the instructions were, don't come to Calais, go to Paris, go to Brussels, or go to Warsaw if you're in Poland, and get a biometric test, go through all the usual Home Office paperwork. And by the way, it could take 1 or 2 weeks to process you. Now, a lot of the 90% of the people are women and children, most of them with one bag or a bin liner of clothes. We need to do more to help them more quickly. To expect them to sort of queue up like a sort of ordinary person and wait 2 to 3 weeks to get biometric tests is a ridiculous hurdle to put the people through. Now, I understand from what I've read in the past 24, 48 hours, the government seems to be making that more easy for people. So simply go online and apply for a visa. Now, I haven't tested it. I haven't spoken to anybody. And I think that is certainly a step in the right direction. But the reality is that people will move across. And I do think we need to certainly have some sort of processing center, I'm going to guess, on the French side of the border, if not the UK side of the border, where we can fast track refugees through. Now, I certainly understand the Home Secretary's concern, I suspect, that she doesn't want other sorts of people coming through the system and trying to cheat the system. I totally get that, but I think you're going to find, most of the people who are coming are going to be genuine Ukrainians. And all you need is a handful of Ukrainian interpreters there who will quickly be able to tell you, yes, this person is genuinely a Ukrainian who needs support. That would probably take them 30 seconds to figure out. Most of the people I've seen this morning, in particular, have the proper identification papers, even if they haven't got a passport. So they know to bring that with them. But as I said earlier in this discussion, my bigger concern is the second and third waves of people who might come from poor families and maybe sort of reluctantly driven out of their country rather than looking to get out somewhere else in the short to medium term, are leaving their country reluctantly and may not have the necessary paperwork. And I think that's going to be the challenge. Certainly we in the UK are going to have, even though clearly the Poles and the Slovakians and Moldovans and Hungarians and Romanians do not have that sort of issue. Their view is, come into the country, we'll sort you out, you're in a secure area. And from this point along the border, we will either find you accommodation in our own country, or if you have friends and relatives you want to go to further west, we will facilitate that. Now, the bus company that I'm working with here is sort of doing almost a sort of three-way trip. So they're coming down from the Baltic states. And what they're doing is there is a number of Ukrainians who are living in Russia, who are now leaving Russia, going into the Baltic states. We're taking them from the Baltic states by bus down to Poland, and then letting them go back into Ukraine so they can fight the Russians who they've been working for in the past few years. Inside of Ukraine, we've got 3 buses that are mainly taking people from Lvov or Lviv through to the border crossing in Poland. We then, the challenge then is getting across the border from Lviv the border crossing in Ukraine to Poland. And there's sort of a no man's land there. And that's a bit of a challenge at the moment. Once they're in Poland, we then have buses that take them to these centers that we've got along the border here, where they're being given beds, food, and so on, and then trying to figure out where do they go to next. Then we have the buses that take them from the centers to, as I said, the 3 or 4 cities that we've discussed: Berlin, Paris, Luxembourg, and Riga at the moment. And there's no shortage of buses at the moment. There's been a little lull in the past 2 to 3 days where the centers haven't been as full. But I think people are beginning to prepare to let the next wave through who are coming through the border. I think in the next probably 2 to 3 or 4 days, as the bombing, this is what I read on the news, seems to be moving further west from Kiev.
Okay. And back, so just talking more about sort of what the UK can do and the UK government specifically, back in 2016, you were sort of writing about the conflict in Syria, and you were writing about the failure for NATO to enforce a no-fly zone over Aleppo. Is that something that you want to see in Ukraine? Do you agree with Zelensky on that?
I think. Look, I certainly understand why Zelensky wants to do that. I think the big fear from our side, and it's a bit of a double standard from Putin, saying, how dare you come in and take me on? I'm invading this independent, free, democratic country. Don't you dare put in a no-fly zone because it'll trigger a nuclear war. I'm sort of skeptical that will happen, but I can certainly see and I'm not a military person, but I suspect from NATO's standpoint, they're nervous about triggering a hot war at this stage. Now, I think it really depends where the public mood goes. I think the sad part of all this is that, we've had certainly 3 unpopular wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya to a certain extent. We weren't engaged in Syria at all. And that has put people off intervening. But the irony is, of course, is that this is a time when we should be intervening, and we should be helping people who in many ways I view as fellow Europeans, close to us in Europe, right on NATO's border. But I think that if we engage with Russia, it does risk triggering a massive war. And, the problem with Putin is that, I think he's, I'm not going to say mad, but I think he's lost the plot a little bit. And he's very angry. This is a guy who is going through some sort of psychological trauma from the end of the Cold War. He's never forgiven the fact that the Cold War has ended, that Russia now is really no longer a superpower. It's a second-tier power in the world. And he's paranoid. I think that, look, I've spent the past pre-COVID, I was spending time lecturing in both Russia at Moscow State University and Voronezh State University in Russia. And I was also lecturing in Kiev and Odessa. So I've been lecturing politics in both sides. And I certainly, I've kept in touch with many of the young people in both the countries. And I have to say, certainly the majority of younger generation in Russia do not like what's going on. Now, there is a minority who, is accepting a lot of the narrative that Putin is coming up with, that he's trying to denazify Ukraine, that and all the other stuff you're obviously seeing in the media now, which I find ironic again, because both the president and prime minister of Ukraine are Jewish. Now, you don't need to denazify a state that's led by 2 Jewish people. So, but the worry is that, again, I don't know if you've been seeing, but certainly we've been hearing on the ground here that, the Russians have a huge logistical challenge at the moment, that they've been fighting a very old style war. And the fuel supplies and so on have not been getting to the front. So they're sort of bogged down when they've come down from Belarus, and they're being picked off by drones and snipers and everything else. And a lot of the young recruits who are, in the Russian army thought they were going on exercises, and suddenly find themselves, in a battle and being picked off. And I think that's going to be quite debilitating on morale for the Russian military. And I think, what I think is amazing is how Putin, who likes to control the narrative, that he seems to have lost the media war outside of Russia. He's lost the economic war. I think it's been much sharper, much more painful than he's expected, and he's really lost the first 2 weeks of the military campaign. So on every level, Putin is being increasingly shown to be a straw man. Now the question is there anybody inside Russia who's willing to take him on?
Yeah.
And I think it depends. There's a sort of symbiotic relationship between Putin and the oligarchs. They sort of support each other. And, how many billions are the oligarchs willing to lose before they sort of give Putin a revolver and tell him to do the decent thing? Now, I can't see Putin doing the decent thing because that's not in his character.
No.
So I think that's highly unlikely. But I think, I think tactically, the West has done the right thing in putting a huge amount of economic pressure on. And, people are quipping around here how the ruble has gone from ruble to the rubble. And I think that's very much the case. And you've seen the stock market crash there. You've seen the ruble crash. You've seen a lot of, obviously, international multinationals pulling out. And I think this last move of trying to stop importing carbon fuels will have a big impact on them in terms of their GDP. They can withstand the financial services, the impact on the oligarchs. That doesn't really hurt the economy and Putin directly. What does hurt him is that if we stop taking gas and oil, because the irony is the longer the war goes on, it pushes up fuel prices, which means Putin is making more and more money. If we stop importing gas and oil, then he has a real problem. And I think the GDP impact will be significant. When I say significant, I mean probably 15% plus of his GDP. And that will impact him. I think he's saved up something like a war chest of 450 billion. And I don't think that's going to last too long. I think he thought he could withstand it for 2 years, but I think that again will diminish much quicker than he expects.
Yeah.
So, but going back to your original question, I think we're doing the right thing by putting a huge economic squeeze on him. I think we're doing the right thing by supplying the Ukrainian military the weapons that they need on the ground, which I felt that we should have been doing in Syria a while back, but we're certainly doing it in Ukraine. I think since 2014, post Crimea, we started preparing the Ukrainian military. And I think they've been relatively well trained. They know how to use a lot of the more modern weaponry. And most importantly, in terms of training, they've been trained, I understand from military people I've spoken to, in counterinsurgency. So we haven't even got to the counterinsurgency bit. They haven't managed to get Mariupol or Kharkiv or Kiev. So I think that says a lot really about the strength and the ability of the Russian military. I think they haven't really fought a war yet. If you go back to Afghanistan, post-Afghanistan, you had Georgia, which, could capitulate fairly quickly. You had Crimea, which they could walk into, and you had Eastern Ukraine, which was sort of a drip, drip, drip. So they haven't really had a tough military campaign in 30 years to fight. And of course, you had the Chechens as well. So I think they're now finding a sort of semi-decent, good fighting force in the Ukrainians. And there's about 130,000 Russians that are coming in, but there's, probably, 1 million plus, young men who are fighting, willing to fight, that can take them on. And there's I don't know what the population is, but I'm think it's like 24 million or whatever it is. You know, other than the women and children, the men are staying behind and fighting. Now, if you're a young Russian recruit who you've been told you're going on a training exercise and you're finding yourself in a battle against people who are fighting for their country, it's a, you know, even though it's a David versus Goliath, I think we could be finding David making a big impact on Goliath, certainly in the next few weeks ahead here.
Yeah. So just going back to what you were saying about Britain and whether we're doing enough, just sort of widening that out a bit. Do you think the international community has learned from the refugee crisis? And obviously you're in Poland and you're seeing people firsthand. Do you think enough is being done on a humanitarian side? And have we learned from
yes, I'm
the
certainly
crisis?
going to, I can only talk about where I am in Poland.
Yeah,
and I think
course.
the Poles here have been first class in the work that they've been doing. They've been incredibly quick off their feet, being incredibly organized, been incredibly welcoming, and I'm hoping the other border countries have been the same. But certainly what I've seen here has been a very positive impact on a humanitarian level. I hope that in the UK, as the new minister for refugees, gets his feet under the table, and you know he did a good job, I think, with the Syria crisis. But I think I think we will move much quicker than we did with the Syrians in being very welcoming to the Ukrainians. And the only thing I would ask is really, you know, let's get some more hubs in place. Let's make it easier for the refugees, even if it's helping people get processed here in the border countries in Poland, in Slovakia, in Romania, Moldova, and Hungary. You know, let's get some people out here to help process those visas, because not everyone's going to be able to easily do it online.
Yeah.
No, not everyone's necessarily got smartphones and everything else. They're at the moment just running for their lives, crossing to the border. And when they get the other side of the border, we should be doing what we can to facilitate their movements and helping at least some of these refugees get to our country.
Yeah, that's great. And in terms of what you're doing, do you want to talk a bit about what you're doing, you know, in the last few days, and who you've been working with, and sort of more things that you've seen personally?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've just been, I mean, as I said, I joined a friend of mine who's got a bus company, and it's really been going to the, there's been 5 centers I've been working at here, finding out where people have relatives or friends in the 4 cities that we're going to, which is been, as I said, primarily Berlin, Paris, Riga, and a little bit of Luxembourg as well. We've been getting people to. So I think those is sort of what we've been doing. We've probably moved yesterday we moved 40 orphans from Lvov. We had a bus in, as I said, we've had some buses inside of Ukraine. So we moved 40 orphans from an orphanage in Lvov to the border. We got them through the border very quickly. We got them back on a bus on our side, and we took them up to Riga yesterday, and they were there by 8 o'clock in the evening, having crossed the border at midday. So that was, you know, each day is a different challenge, a different achievement. And we're moving on average, I'd say 1 or 2 buses a day. 1 or 2 buses, meaning, you know, 49 people per bus. So it's roughly 100 people a day. We've been moving across to Western Europe.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, it's amazing that the sort of work that's being done. And as I say, it seems like a very good thing to be able to be moving those people across the border and who are certainly in need of that sort of thing. In the last few days, Poland put forward a proposal for fighter jets to Ukraine via a swap with the US, a proposal that eventually got shot down. Do you back that sentiment? Yeah. And do you think that such a move would exacerbate the conflict? I know we've spoken a little bit about this sort of.
Well,
thing already,
I'm not sure, because you know, I think what we're doing is, I think the kit that we are providing to let's say in simple language, shoot down planes, um,
Yeah.
is pretty good. And I think perhaps the thinking is, rather than sending over slightly old-fashioned MiGs to take on the Russians, probably a better thing to do is to provide anti-aircraft weapons, Stinger missiles, surface-to-air missiles, things that can shoot down planes rather than having aerial combat. Now, there's a debate. Can we stop the Russians dominating the skies? I think there's as I said, a different approach to achieving the same thing, which is giving very good kit, which is I think the MOD is doing to the Ukrainians on the ground close to where I am, to actually fight a slightly different battle than an air battle.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm not a military person, so I can't really comment.
No, but that's still very useful. And I mean, they're the questions that we sort of had written down for you. If there's anything else that you want to add, I mean, feel free.
No,
I'm
no,
sort of also aware that you're a very busy person. I've kept you for quite a long time.
Look, earlier this morning, I was with a group that came from Gloucester. They came with a massive articulated lorry full of things like nappies and food and clothes and things that to give the refugees when they get here. And I think that, anybody listening in the UK, there are lots and lots of centers being set up, and do anything that you can, however small it is. This all adds up. And if everybody does something rather than nothing, it's going to make a big difference to people when they cross the border and are on this side in Europe.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, as I say, I'm sort of aware that I've taken a lot more of your time than we'd.
And I'm absolutely bloody freezing because it's minus.
Yeah, I'm aware that holding your phone there is probably...
freeze off. I'm going to go in and get a bowl of soup, and thanks a lot for chatting, and hopefully chat again later.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your time, and I hope your hands do warm up as well. I'm sure they're probably freezing right now.
Thanks,
brilliant.
Thank
you for that.
Shaking. My hand is shaking here on the. Okay, thanks then.
Cheers. All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye.